would argue that we don't need it at all. And there are some conservative arguments to that, but I won't take a position too formally on that because I haven't really studied that specific issue lately.
Thank you. Something rolled off your tongue so smoothly just a minute ago about the import-export bill joining in with the transportation bill. In my opinion, the transportation bill is the most wasteful bill that we have, and you said it's automatically assumed that they're going to get a transport system. Our transport system in Longview costs 5 to 7 times what it takes in. And that's true all over America.
Right.
That's not right. How can we change that?
Well, like I said, I think that the Transportation Empowerment Act, which is an effort to push all the transportation decisions down to the state and municipal levels, as well as revenue, makes our state legislature more answerable. And it's a lot easier to affect transportation reforms in Austin than DC, because it's a lot easier to replace state reps and state senators with a really well-run campaign. So state reps are, I think, a little bit more vulnerable. Do we have any current state reps in there? Okay, well, this is an issue that hopefully we're trying to put on your table so that you have to deal with it. But if you want to drive costs down, I think that's the best way to do it, because they are entirely in charge of all of the decisions. There's no, right now the Federal Transportation Highway Trust Fund has tons of mandates, and so a lot of their choices are limited at the state level, which affects our ability to make sure it's efficiently spent.
And our legislatures want to do that?
Well, so the question was, can our state legislature undo that? And at the federal level, this is going to be difficult, although we are making improvements and we're making steps forward in that direction. We're getting more and more members to support this concept. At the state level, it's a little bit harder to do this because it's a federal program, and unless you're talking about or a supporter of something like nullification, then the answer is no. We have to wait for DC to basically disentangle itself from the entire operation altogether and give it back to the states.
I have a question right here. IRS, we say that Lois Lerner has been, it looks like that they're not going to do anything with her. But my question too is that we've had a legal group that is really going out and trying to get her to talk and whatever and everything. Well, you've got all this money that's being spent, and now then with this here, is that going to probably be dropped by this legal foundations and these supports that are trying to get something done about the IRS?
So there are things that are not in the light of day yet regarding the IRS issue, and some of this is being held back by the groups themselves because they want to reserve the right to actually get something done, and they don't think that anything's going to get done in DC right now. So they're reserving the option to sue unilaterally if DC decides not to take action. And so what we've seen is a lot of committees. So this is actually a good example of what happens in DC when they don't want to do something. In a lot of cases, they'll assign a committee to investigate it. And these investigations will take a very long time, and then nothing gets done. You get a lot of good press out of it. Trey Gowdy destroys these people on cross-examination. The problem is that what do we do with this? What have we done about Hillary Clinton's Benghazi, emails, the IRS? All of these different groups or issues and scandals have been investigated, and nothing's getting done. So I think that there's, one of the things I'm hoping for, unless Obama pardons everyone, is that the next president and their next attorney general will decide to actually do something about this. So if it's a President Cruz or Rubio or Trump or whoever you might have, I'm hoping that the next Department of Justice will take this seriously and actually put some of these people in jail. It's my opinion that what transpired at the IRS, based on what we know, is one of the most egregious abuses of government in modern history. It's shocking, especially the things that I've heard from groups on issues that are not yet public, which I'm not allowed to talk about, which I hope someday come to light of day at the right time when it can be used to put some people in jail. But there's no doubt that the government specifically targeted conservatives, and someone should go to jail for that. I think it was Machiavelli who basically said, in a roundabout way, that the biggest crime is a crime against the people. And that is the crime that should be the most severely punished. And his prescription was pretty severe. He was meaning the death penalty. Now, I'm not saying that we should be putting anyone to death, but what I am saying is that anytime you see corruption of that scale in government, it needs to be dealt with in the most harsh terms. It needs to be very public, and it needs to be strong. I would support lengthy federal prison sentences for the people involved in this as a signal to anyone else who even thinks about this, that this is what happens. And that's what you have to do to deter corruption at the federal level, is you have to have swift and very strong, forceful action against them.
Anyone else? Here we go.
What? I have one.
All right, we got you.
Is there anything that can be done about what happened in Wisconsin with all the activities that the Democrats did? In my eyes, it's just as criminal as it can be.
What specifically are you talking about in Wisconsin?
They're doing confiscating computers of people who were supporting the Republican campaign. And
So is this the state government that's confiscating issues?
well, it was, yes, it was under the Democratic-controlled district attorney, and
I'm vaguely familiar with what you're talking about. Unfortunately, because it's not the federal level, I'm not quite sure. I wouldn't be able to, anything I would say would be a total guess, and I wouldn't want to.
On this IRS, I just heard on the radio or TV that they're thinking about the possibility of impeaching
Right.
the IRS commissioner.
Right.
Is that
Which
true?
is fantastic. I fully support that. Now, but this is again a really good example of DC manipulating issues in order to satiate conservatives. So they've been doing all this bad stuff on the debt ceiling, the CRs, funding Planned Parenthood, trying to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank, trying to bail out the Highway Transportation Fund for billions of dollars, increasing the debt by $1.5 trillion, increasing annual spending by $80 billion. There's a whole bunch of bad stuff going on right now. The reason that they brought this up now is to kind of, it's what we call a shiny object. You know, look over here, we're doing something you like, and meanwhile they're doing all this stuff over here. This is a standard trick. Another example of this is they're announcing a committee to investigate Planned Parenthood. Look, I'm all for that, but some of the Republicans are saying that we need to investigate them before we defund them. And my argument is, look, we've seen the videos. Government, whether these videos even existed or not, government should not be funding an organization that participates in abortions. So whether these videos exist, whether there's any criminal negligence that actually happened or not, we shouldn't be funding them. So let's defund them in the CR, and then we'll get to investigating them, and if there's any people who need to go to jail or who broke the law or need, fines, we'll get to that. But long story short, yes, Commissioner Koskinen, I can't pronounce his name, the IRS commissioner, they've announced that they're going to impeach him. But what would have happened in an ideal sense is they would have waited to announce this until after Christmas, so that conservatives could keep the focus on getting done what we need to get done on these debt ceiling deals. Ideally, we would have gotten spending cuts for the debt ceiling. We would have gotten spending cuts and defunded Planned Parenthood on the continuing resolution. We would not have reauthorized the Export-Import Bank. There's all sorts of things we want to get done. And something like, hey, we're going to impeach the IRS commissioner is meant to distract us. And this is the way they operate. And so the sooner we understand this, what really made me happy is when I went on Twitter and a whole bunch of our conservative activists, some of them who were targeted by the IRS, got mad that they announced that they were going to do it because they saw it for what it is, and they saw that they were being manipulated, and that made them really angry. When the conservative movement is operating on that high of a level and is outmaneuvering the establishment, it gives the establishment fits. When I was in South Carolina, Jim Jordan, who's a great member of Congress, announced that he was going to do this. One of our sentinels actually stood up and asked him to wait until after Christmas because this is going to distract from all our efforts. You should have seen the look on Jim Jordan's face. That was the last thing he expected to hear. And this is a good member of Congress. The bad member of Congress is when they see that, drives them crazy. And this is where we want to push the conservative movement to. And this is where we provide this type of information.
This is not a question. In fact, you already answered it.
Okay?
And that is, no matter who we elect, it seems like nothing ever gets done. Nothing. You answered the question. We're actually a divided party. We're arguing among ourselves. And to me, that sounds like disaster. November.
Yes, it could be. So our argument has been all along that the Republican Party needs to be pushing issues that we all have a consensus on. So we should be getting behind issues like the Export-Import Bank, where the entire Republican Party can talk about corporate welfare and Hillary Clinton and putting taxpayer dollars in the pockets of the 1%. Now listen, I'm all for wealth creation. I'm all for corporations doing wonderful and creating jobs. But corporate welfare is a bad thing, and that's an issue we should be a consensus issue. We've been begging the Republican Party leadership, and Boehner and McConnell, to bypass all these divisive issues and put only issues forward that we can agree on, and then we'll turn the argument against Democrats. They have refused to do this. In fact, they have been specifically alienating conservatives, blocking them out of all the negotiations and deal making, bringing forward issues specifically meant to anger the conservative movement, because their goal is to make us go away, to just stop trying to fight them. They just don't understand that that's not going to work, and in the long term, it's just going to harm them. So there may be a period of pain here. I hope that it won't affect our chances in the 2016 election, but if the establishment wing of the Republican Party was serious about winning, they would do exactly what you just said, and what I'm saying is focus on consensus issues where we can really paint the Democrat Party for what it is, which is a fraud and completely hypocritical on so many issues that they try to take the moral high ground on. I mean, talk about poverty. Democrats are created more poverty in the last 80 years, and it's unconscionable. We should be calling them out on that. We should be talking about LBJ's Great Society programs and how that destroyed minority communities. We have all these things in our arsenal, and they just refuse to push the narrative there. And one other thing that they refuse to do is they don't want to elevate something to where it's a major fight with Obama. And if you don't do that, so one of their arguments was, listen, we can fight on Obamacare, but Obama's just going to veto it. So why even try? Well, the reason we try is because we elevate the issue that the media has to cover Obamacare if it's a major fight. And Democrats do not do well when the narrative is about Obamacare. So instead of talking about income inequality or whatever social justice issue that the left wants to be in the media, we can instead control the narrative. In fact, this is what Ted Cruz did when he tried to defund Obamacare in the summer of 2013. That wasn't just about defunding Obamacare. That was about preventing Congress for about 6 or 7 months from bringing up a comprehensive, really bad comprehensive immigration bill. So he made the issue about Obamacare and then closed the policy window on a comprehensive immigration program that would probably include an amnesty. So a lot of people don't understand everything that was going on behind the scenes on that, but that was one of his purposes. And the Republican Party leadership fundamentally cedes our ability to do that. Instead, they allow Obama and the leftist media to define the narrative. And so what are we talking about right now? You know, we're talking about shootings and whatever the left wants to talk about, instead of, you know, why are we defunding Planned Parenthood, or why are we defunding or repealing Obamacare? So that's a problem, and they need to fix that.
One last question.
Yeah, I'm sitting and listening to you, and you express a lot of the sentiments that I have. I've gotten to the point where I no longer feel like I'm a Republican. And so, you know, when they call up, I don't give them money because, explicit example is what they did in Mississippi in the last election.
Right.
And so, I guess my question is, strategically looking out into the future, how long are conservatives going to put up with the RNC and the establishment? You know, we have the votes, they have the money, but they can't win elections without us.
Right.
And we don't seem to be able to reach any kind of agreement, so is down the road, are we basically going to end up having to form our own party?
So I'm gonna, since we don't do campaigns or elections, I'm gonna answer this just on my own. I'm not answering on behalf of Eric Jackson. I'm answering on behalf of myself. If you look at, so political science was, you know, my major in college, and I've looked at this issue. When you have single-member districts, and we've had single-member districts since 1842, and you have a plurality vote system, just from a game theory perspective, going single party, and I'm not telling you what to do, statistically is the hardest route. The easiest route is to reform the Republican Party itself. So my personal opinion is as frustrating as it can be, and from a 30,000 foot view, from what I do, and I talk to so many activist groups and I cover so many congressional districts, what is lost is the fact that we're actually winning. It's just not being represented in legislative form yet. So this is actually a battle that we are moving forward on, and they are in slow retreat on, and they have an indefensible position. So I think that the solution for us is to, and again, if you disagree, that's fine. I won't debate you on it. But I think that the best solution is to get involved in our party, stay active, whether or not you self-identify as a Republican or if you just self-identify as conservative, I would still vote in the Republican primaries. I think that that's statistically our best option. Now, who's to say in 5 years if things are not going our way, well, let's revisit and look at the data and compare paths and strategy. But I think that we have to. I take a look at this from kind of a Marine Corps perspective, and there's a really famous quote out there, and I think this is kind of the attitude we need to have, and what will actually result in us winning ultimately. And it's from Chesty Puller, who was a lieutenant colonel in North Korea. And as the Chinese counterattacked, and it was a surprise attack by the Chinese, he sent in a situation report. And his situation report was, they're in front of us, they're behind us, they're on both flanks, they've got us surrounded, they can't get away from us now. And so this is the attitude we need to have. So I am a target by all the establishment, or Republicans, their staff. They do not like me. I try to be friendly as best as I can. I will never be offered a job by a lot of these people. But I relish the fact that if you look at this from a substantive nature, if you talk about this logically, fact-based, lay out the entire case, we are morally correct in what we are doing. And we're also substantively right and technically right. And so when you combine all of that together, I think what we have to do is keep pushing forward and understand, as miserable as we are, the establishment is even more miserable. They are not happy right now. And they don't know what to do about it. And they're seeing this in the presidential campaign. They thought that Jeb Bush was just going to walk away with this thing. He's in 4th or 5th. Now, we look back and see who was in the lead last presidential cycle, and that's not necessarily who ended up winning, and anything could happen. And he does have a lot of money. But they did not anticipate that this was going to turn out this way. They thought he was going to be the runaway candidate, and that's just not happening. So everywhere they're turning, they're lashing out because they don't like it. In fact, many members of Congress have retired recently, and one of the reasons they said is because it's just not fun anymore, which means that they're not able to go on these junkets. They can't get these earmarks, which means that they're getting easy campaign dollars from all the people who benefit from it. They're actually having to work, and they're actually having to face tougher re-election cycles. And I actually plotted this out from 2006 to the 2014 elections. I put together an Excel spreadsheet and printed out the graph. And at the federal level, it shows in the primaries, the percent that the incumbent was getting and the percent that the challenger was getting. Now, no doubt that I think it's really difficult at the federal level to challenge an incumbent. Everything has to come together. It's not a good chance of success necessarily. But the two lines, if you start up here, this is the percentage of the vote that the incumbents were getting, this is the percentage that the challengers were getting. Those two lines are converging. Right now, they're at about 60-40. They started out at like 80-20. Every election cycle, they've gotten closer when you take in the aggregate. Things are moving our direction. So I would say, I'll end on this, and I'll stick around for questions afterwards, but stay the course and make them more miserable than we are, and we will win. So, thank you.
Mr. Miller stated, what a great time tonight. But he'll be around to answer any more individual questions. We have candidates out in the foyer who will certainly visit with you and share your concerns with them. And don't forget our donation boxes at the back of the church. See you in December for lots of exciting things.